We have another question here from Douglas Peebles. Dr. Plummer has mentioned 2 books. Could they be mentioned again?
Okay, I think I mentioned this Septuagint book, the Septuagint, what it is and why it matters. I think I mentioned that. Since you're it's just sort of like throwing a professor a slow pitch. Since you asked about my books, I will mention, just I hope it's okay for me to mention.
Yeah, of course.
Greek for Life.
Yeah.
So this is like there we go, Greek for Life. And I co-authored this with Ben Merkel. And so this is like your personal trainer to learn Greek. And so like it teaches you memory techniques. It has tons of quotes from Martin Luther and John Calvin and Augustine and John Piper about why we should learn Greek. And also strategies just for time use and distractions and habits. I find some students, for example, have never learned how to memorize effectively foreign vocabulary. And so it's just a really handy, you say, well, first, if there's a cognate in English, cardia, sound cardiac, heart, use that.
Yeah.
If not, just you have to come up with something that it sounds like for you. And it's going to be different for everybody. But, say, what does hamartia sound like to you? Hamartia, you have the hammer, sounds like hammer tea, So well, think about hammering your mom's teacup. What is sin? Like that. Just and a man visual, like use your. So people just teaching people how to use their memory, how to use. So if you've never studied Greek before and you kind of just want to get fired up for it and have some methods for doing that, I'll recommend that, Greek for Life. And then the book I mentioned, that you can use the website, tons of stuff for free, but it is key to beginninggreek.com. So beginning with New Testament Greek is the intro grammar that, you don't have to have it. You can use all the videos free, but that's the more formal instruction and homework and stuff like that. I don't remember if what was did I mention some other book?
Well, I think it was the Septuagint. That was one of them.
Oh, Reader's Septuagint. Is that what it was? Well, we mentioned the why Septuagint, but then we also, those guys, the Will Ross and Greg Lanier, they have this reader's edition of the Septuagint, Septuagenta. Beautiful, 2 volumes. It's quite large. But it gives the rare vocabulary at the bottom, and it's key. I think it gives it based more on your familiarity with the New Testament, which is helpful for the average reader. So yeah, and it's never been easy. Oh, the other book, Elijah Hickson and Peter Gurry.
That's the one.
Myths and Mistakes in New Testament Textual Criticism.
Yeah.
Myths and Mistakes in New Testament Textual Criticism. Great, fun book.
Yeah. And so another area, I mean, talking about the Greek New Testament and of course the relationship to the Septuagint or the Septuagint, a lot of our readers may have read the New Testament, and there's a quote there from the Old Testament, and then they go to their Old Testament and they go, wait a minute, it reads differently. Why does it read differently?
Yeah.
And of course, that's where we need to talk about the Masoretic text, the Hebrew Old Testament text, and the Septuagint text, the Greek text. And so the majority of the references to the Old Testament, not all, but the majority would be from the Greek Septuagint. And that's why there is a difference, because our English Bibles are based on the Masoretic text.
Yeah.
So if you've got an ESV or NIV or even a King James version, the Hebrew the Old Testament is based on that Hebrew Masoretic text.
Yes.
The New Testament does have some quotations from what we call today the Masoretic text. But would you say, Rob, that the majority of Septuagint, would it be something like 85%, 90%? Where would you place it at?
Yeah. I don't know that I feel confident giving a statistic more than over half, right?
Okay.
And then there's places where, especially if it's a shorter quotation, it's hard to know, is this the author's own translation, or is he relying on, and as you know, there are variants within the Septuagint too,
Sure,
right? And there's so is this a different recension sort of the Septuagint? And in some places, scholars agree that the Septuagint preserves probably a earlier, more reliable wording in some places of an earlier Hebrew parent text. So that's why in the Old Testament, in your English Bible, if you look at sometimes they will follow the Septuagint
Yeah.
wording because they think at this point it's more reliable than the Masoretic text.
Yeah. And one example, sorry.
Yeah, just it'll be noted at the bottom, as no one's hiding it
Yeah.
or anything. So
Yeah, Psalm 22:16, they pierced my hands and my feet. In the Hebrew Masoretic, it says, like a lion at my hands and feet. But the Septuagint agrees that it's they pierced my hands and feet. And the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's readings in the Dead Sea Scrolls that agree with the Septuagint reading. So it's quite interesting how the Dead Sea Scrolls are many places where it agrees with the Greek Old Testament. And therefore indicating that the Greek what we call the Septuagint, again, there's a lot of debate. As you know, William Ross has argued this. There's a lot of debate. What do we mean by the Septuagint? Because there's so many strands.
Yes, I hear the voice of Peter Gentry.
Yeah,
you know, a Canadian scholar.
I know Peter.
Yeah,
very well.
yeah. He's Mr. Septuagint.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's why students don't often realize there is no complete critical edition of the Septuagint.
No.
It's still in process with the Göttingen edition coming out, and Dr. Gentry having done the volume on Ecclesiastes. So, but just that there are these variants and also early translations that you have to look at in other languages and so on. So
yeah. So I have a couple more questions here, Rob. We have Ole Matson. How long should I have read New Testament before I read Septuaginta?
Well, I don't know that there's any simple answer for that. I mean, my daughters learned, they went to a classical school up through 8th grade. And in 7th and 8th grade, they learned Greek, the Greek New Testament. They used Croy's grammar. It's a Lutheran scholar. And he teaches, the translations come from the Septuagint and the New Testament right from the beginning. So they, as 7th and 8th grade girls, were translating the Septuagint alongside even as they were learning the paradigms, just to illustrate usages, because the Septuagint is a great background. We're all limited in time and ability. I mean, we only have so much time and ability. So, here, let me give you a hint for how to add just a little spice of Septuagint into your daily life.
Sure.
Here. I'm going to break the bank on people, all these books I recommend. But this little book here, Daily Scriptures, 365 readings in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. And I know one of the authors of this, he studied under David Allen Black at Southeastern, and now he's in Germany. He's a PhD student. But they put together this really wonderful book, and it has one verse in Hebrew, and then it has the same verse in the Septuagint. So it's nice. Wow. You have the Hebrew verse, the Septuagint verse, and rare vocabulary out to the side. So you have rare vocabulary for all the languages you're dealing with. Then they'll have a topically related verse from the New Testament. Maybe, if it's quoted in the New Testament, maybe, but usually just the same topic. So judgment, and then the same verse in the Latin Vulgate. So you get your little vitamin here of Hebrew, Greek from the Septuagint, Greek from the New Testament, and the Latin Vulgate, just one page with lots of vocabulary helps to the side. So that'd be a way to kind of just ease in a little bit. And then if you wanted like the baby pool, even a little bit deeper than that, Discovering the Septuagint, a Guided Reader by Karen Jobs as the senior editor, that will give you passages throughout the Septuagint, but then reading notes to kind of help you and explain what's going on. There are a lot of other resources out there. Again, if you Google Will Ross Septuagint blog, he's the RTS scholar, and he has a lot of fun stuff on there. So, well,
thank you for all those resources. We have a question here, Rob, all the way from New Zealand. Hi from New Zealand, reading Greek for Life at the moment. I've just completed my first semester New Testament Greek and have 4 weeks before the next. What gospel epistle do you recommend suitable to study on my own at this level?
Well, the easiest gospel to read in the Bible is the Gospel of John, and we're going through that right now in the Daily Dose of Greek. Not that you need to follow along with us, but you can look there. And I'll recommend to you, since we're breaking the bank, if you do go through the Gospel of John, the Baylor Handbook series, Lydia Novakovic has phrase-by-phrase discussion of the Greek in the Gospel of John, 2 volumes. Murray Harris has the same thing in the Exegetical Guide of the Greek New Testament. Those are 2 great series, the Egg and Tea series and the Baylor Handbook series, where they go phrase by phrase through books of the Greek New Testament, just kind of like having a teacher next to you, and you're like, why is this dative? What's going on? And they give you a brief comment on all those grammatical issues. So I would recommend, Karen, starting with the Gospel of John, building your confidence. Then maybe Mark after that. 1st, 2nd, 3rd John are very easy too.
Yeah, totally agree with you. When I was studying Greek at the University of Toronto, my professor began with Mark, and he goes, "Oh, this is very simple." No, I actually found Mark a little harder than John.
Yeah, the vocabulary is more complex.
Yeah.
John just is so limited and simple in his repetition of vocabulary, and uses very few participles. They're often substantive. So
yeah, and it's very much like a catechism. I mean, he does say this is written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, in John 20:31. So it almost sounds like a catechism. Let me tell you about who Jesus really is.
It's beautiful. Yeah. So you can't really go wrong.
Yeah. Another question here from Chris Hunter. Do the proponents of higher criticism attack the ability to fully understand ancient Greek?
I guess where you're going with that is the question of, I'm just trying to understand, Chris, like, are they saying, well, we don't really know what the Greek means or something like that? That would be very difficult to do because we have such a huge corpus of literature, thousands of other papyri and manuscripts and inscriptions from the same time period. We have, just a massive amount of material that's widely viewed as understandable and translated into multiple Latin, Syriac, other languages. I mean, Greek is a language that's been studied maybe more than almost any other language in the world. Now, do you ever come across scholars debating, well, the nuance of this construction is this or this, or this word, what does this rare vocabulary word mean? Does it have this connotation? Sure, you'll have people debate those things. But I think, just in terms of, so let's talk about higher criticism. Look, probably representative of sort of that camp would be the NRSV. Well, the NRSV is a translation of the Greek. It's saying we know what this means, and here it is in English. And if there are places where they feel less confident in the translation, which are few, you will see footnotes saying, could this word could mean X, Y, Z or something like that.
And there have been those as well who've tried to argue that the New Testament was actually originally written in Aramaic. I'm sure you've heard folks, basing it on Papias, his statement that Matthew wrote his gospel in the tongue of the Hebrews. But then he talks about the gospel of the Egyptians, and it kind of gets a little muddied there. What would your response be, Rob, to those who, again, there's some well-meaning Christians who think, Jesus spoke Aramaic and that's the language he spoke. Why do we have the New Testament in Greek and he didn't speak Greek? And you hear a lot of folks bring this up. What would you say to those who hear this type of this rhetoric?
Well, I think the manuscript, linguistic evidence, the testimony of the fathers, we'll set aside the Pappy's quote for just a minute, but is overwhelming that these are documents that are written in Greek, which is the lingua franca of the day. English is, don't hear me, don't sound ethnocentric in saying this, but English is the language of trade and culture right now in this period in history. Someday it will be something else if the world's still around. At that time, it was Greek. And so in the wisdom of God, his word came and it was very quickly translated. We see in Acts that there's the Hebraic and Greek-speaking church early, right there in Jerusalem. We know from archaeological evidence there are many ossuaries in Jerusalem from the first century. The inscription is in Greek. So you have a faithful, religious Jew who's looking for the resurrection. And when he's buried, the inscription on the side is Greek. So see, we have Greek was widely spoken. And so, you know, why the early, I mean, in the wisdom of God, this is the reality that we have. We can speculate about what occurred prior to our apostolic written gospels, but the authoritative inscripturated word we have is in Greek. Now, is it possible that Matthew wrote an earlier draft in Aramaic and you know, later translated it into Greek? It's possible, but the quote published, if we could use that term loosely, version that went public and was copied and viewed, that was the Greek New Testament.
I think it's the end product at the end of the assembly line. You know, you get all the drafting. Okay, we're gonna create this BMW. We've got all the blueprints and everything. We've got all the pieces, but really what matters is what comes at the finish line. That's drivable. That's what can get you from point A to point B. And so I also think Matthew could have written an early draft in Hebrew. Obviously, his gospel is very Jewish, targeted towards a Jewish audience. And I also think that it's possible that, you know, a lot of folks talk about Q, right? The places where Matthew and Luke agree. It's very possible they had access to a saying source that Jesus, of the sayings of Jesus. It's possible, but what matters is the end product that God has seen in his goodwill, his good pleasure to bring to his people. And I think the effect of Alexander the Great's empire, I mean, it revolutionized, it Hellenized the world, really. And I was just going to say, you mentioned the Greek inscriptions in the ossuaries. I mean, Jesus had disciples with Greek names. I mean, Philip is not a Greek, a Hebrew name. It means a lover of horses. And Andrew and Thomas. So I think that when we look at some of these names, the apostles were known by Greek names as well.
Yes, well said. And it is, I think it is likely that probably we have to say things like likely, perhaps, certainly, you know, we can't be, I mean, if you see every now and then, especially Mark, you know, Jesus said to the girl, Talitha cum, which says, I mean, we have these ipsissima verba, the actual sounds that came out of Jesus' mouth. And when they're given, there's sometimes, I mean, they're often these Aramaic phrases, and what we know of spoken language, it's very likely that most of Jesus' ministry, I think, was in Aramaic. But we also do know that even Galilee of that time, it was very Hellenized. And you have the very Hellenistic city of Sepphoris, just right over the hill from Nazareth, and where a lot of excavation is going on today. And you can go there and see the pagan mosaics. Clearly, it's not a Jewish home. I mean, just so close to where Jesus grew up, and realizing that he and his father and maybe brothers would have been working in the construction business, probably working in different areas. I mean, I'm speculative, but you know, very likely doing business. And I mean, if you go to Israel today, I don't know if you can go because of the pandemic, but if you go to Galilee today, you'll have a little barefoot Palestinian kid run up to you and speak to you in 3 or 4 languages until they can get you to respond, trying to sell you postcards. Because, you know, commerce is an incentive for people to be able to communicate in multiple languages.
And I think even the word that we have in the Greek New Testament for a carpenter, tekton, I think it could also mean a stonemason or someone who works with stone.
A builder.
Builder. And so it doesn't necessarily have to mean a carpenter. It could. And so we know that there was a lot of work in Sepphoris, and we also know there's a lot of theaters there. And so this is why I was grabbing that idea where Jesus speaks of the hypocrite. He calls the religious leaders hypocrites, those who wear masks. They're pretending to be something they're not. So and even his dialogue with Pilate when he was being interrogated by Pontius Pilate. I mean, we know the Romans spoke Greek, at least they spoke Greek in their Senate up until I think it was 200 AD when Latin took over. But they also spoke Greek. It was the imperial language. So I would imagine Jesus was talking Greek with Pilate.
Yeah.
from what
Yeah,
I
I think that's
understand.
a very reasonable
Yeah.
speculation. I have to ask you, because there was a professor from, or actually just a graduate from here decades ago. He went to Israel and
Mm.
he translated the Bible from the Greek, is Bob Lindsay, from the Greek New Testament into modern Hebrew. Now,
Oh,
it's a bit of a trick question, but which gospel do you think translated the easiest from Greek to modern Hebrew, which is just the same, very similar to biblical Hebrew?
from Greek to modern Hebrew?
Yeah, you might guess Matthew, like people use it,
I
but
would say, was it John?
it was Luke. It was
Luke.
Luke, which is
Wow.
strange because Luke is a Gentile,
Yeah.
and Bob Lindsay, apparent, if I remember correctly, came up with some strange view that Luke wrote first in Hebrew and whatever. But
Okay.
think about this: how much his style is influenced by the Septuagint,
Yes.
which is very often a very literal translation of the Hebrew, and it'd be sort of like hearing grandma in a rural Kentucky church, "Oh Lord,
Yeah.
thou art great," and you're like, "Wow, she's from the 1600s. She
Yeah.
uses thee and thou," and you're like, "No,
Yeah.
no, no. Grandma's just read the King James version a great deal," and so Luke is kind of like that in his
Mm.
style.
Especially the first two chapters are very, very much in keeping with
Mm,
the Hebraic style of the Old
mm,
Testament.
mm.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, I'm just going to mention to our just our viewers again. I'm joined today by Dr. Robert Plummer from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, talking about why it's important to read the Greek New Testament. So we don't have much time left. I'm trying to be mindful of Dr. Plummer's time. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask. Um, is there anything else, Rob, that you could also recommend to our viewers? I'm really trying to encourage our viewers to take advantage of this, uh,
Yeah.
because most folks have to go to school to try to learn all of this, but this is all available online.
Yeah, it's all free. So,
Yeah,
yeah, we've talked about a lot of books, but really the books are optional for learning Greek because we do have so many resources free. I guess I would just say, if you've been listening to this and you think, I'd like to learn Greek or I'd like to learn Hebrew, my challenge to you is to take a step tonight to do it. So you need to like tell your spouse or tell your friend, "Hey, this isn't just going to stay in my head. I'm going to start learning Greek. I'm going to do one lesson a week. Like,
mhm,
get a real specific goal, or 5 minutes a day. I'm going to spend 5 minutes a day. And when the timer goes off on my phone, I'm done." Just to build some habit, to build. So it's rather than just leaving it in the realm of, I wish or hope this happens, I would challenge people to take a very specific step um, to to learn and just give it a try, and it may infect you when you realize that after just a few days you're able to read complete sentences, simple sentences, but complete sentences from the Greek New Testament. It's just so gratifying.
mhm.
People, could bring you to tears, to read the Bible in the original, and it's totally doable. I think the oldest person I've heard from on the Daily Dose is 90 probably, but I've
Oh,
got people all ages. Some people don't start learning until they're retired, but you
mhm.
totally can. Or even homeschooling moms say, "Hey, can I incorporate this into teaching my kids at home?" Yeah, totally. You take the stuff and run with it, and as long as you're a little bit ahead of them, then you can teach them. So
Yeah, yeah. And so, folks, I would really encourage you to go to dailydoseofgreek.com and subscribe, or if you want to go to the Beginner's Greek, all the links are available there. Again, they're all in the description box. So if you want to connect, all that information is there. If you come from a Korean background, there's a link there to that. A Spanish background, there's a link there as well. I would encourage you. I found in my own Christian experience that learning the Greek New Testament was a formidable weapon against the critics of the Bible. It was a weapon against those who try to undermine the scriptures, and especially those who are coming from a non-Christian angle. And I think it was Martin Luther, the reformer, who said that reading the original languages, he says the Word of God is a sword, but I think he described it as every time we study the original languages, we are sharpening the blade of God's word. We are sharpening. You know, blades get dull over time.
Yeah.
And so we need to sharpen them. And so I really would encourage you folks to really take advantage of this. We're not calling you to be scholars. Maybe some of you will become scholars, but we're not calling you to be scholars. We're calling you to read the Word of God in the original language. And what a blessing that we still have that language with us and that we can access it.